Let's go. Hey guys, I am here today with you to talk about marketing, and which is a little bit outside my domain. I am an engineer, but one thing I've noticed, especially when you're trying to build something useful for people or generally a product, it's often the case that you need to talk to people. And I've always found it somewhat challenging. So, especially if you're an introvert who has often the challenge to go out there and meet people or talk to different people just to see how your idea evolves, it's often the best to start with you because, after all, you are people. And that's one of the thought or spark of thought that came to me when essentially I was just basically self-reflecting. And why I'm saying talk to yourself essentially, or have a reflection with yourself, is that you are essentially building a product, and it definitely starts with you. So I've always found the term "build for what people want," or "build for people," or essentially go out there and build useful things that people wanted. I've always found that term really challenging because, wait, is there often the case that can you not build things for yourself? Well, it's often called the blind spot effect, right? So you can think of it as a way when you're similar to how you're driving a car. If you have a certain blind spot, and you cannot totally see the full perspective of your journey, I can only look as far enough, it even adds to the uncertainty that if you're starting a business on your own, it's often the case that business, is especially the windshield, or the, kind of stretching the analogy already, but the more you try to look forward, it's often foggy and the future is so uncertain. So you are in charge of making that or building that future. And it's often the case that whenever you're trying to drive or grow your business or take your business off the ground, you have to go out there and understand what people want. And this is where the talking stage, or essentially, you have to understand what people want. And it's often the case that people would not really tell you what they want for a whole lot of reasons, because people are very complicated. So, and also it's often the case that you, as the builder, if you're building a product that either helps people, which is you yourself, that is also a valid case. So that's the point that I'm trying to make here. So where do you start with building a product? You talk to yourself. So that's one area where people often miss. And it's often the case that, okay, most people might think it's idea, but it's honestly a conversation with yourself. And a conversation loop with yourself generates more ideas. So essentially, that conversation loop helps you drive more action, build more action, and eventually, this action-driven potential creates more conversation, and you generate more information as you go. And this is the whole goal of having to being driven, or essentially having that continuous drive. And it all starts with conversing with yourself, starting to solve your problems. So once you have a platform, then that means once you have a stable platform, in essence, you are able to then reach out and essentially go out there and reach out and help more people. So that's the power of compounding, right? So think of yourself as a state 0 or as a ground state, and having to build up another level higher, or another layer higher. You have to essentially take the leap to go from 0 to 1. And once you go to that level, and then you go with the whole progress until eventually snowball into a very good seismic exponential growth. So that's kind of the thought that I have every time whenever I'm encountered with the unknown, essentially whenever I'm forced to go out there and actually build something useful that people want. And that's something that's often highly useful and at scale. That's always a thought that comes to me, because you always have to start with a single instance, which is you. And if you alone cannot sustain or have a stable platform, then you cannot really support you cannot even start a business. So you are the ultimate beginning of a launch pad. That's what I'm trying to say here. And you as a launch pad has the potential to turn things around and essentially make useful things that people actually want. So kind of circling back on the statement that I made here, you have to talk a lot with people, and that initial talk, or eventually that initial conversation loop, which is called an idea. And most recently I've been quite splitting words, essentially trying to break down and understand words from their core beginnings. And I don't know why idea sounds like idea. Dia is like God, and essentially like I call on God. And to that degree, what idea is like, you're pulling from a source, a higher source that has the biggest pool of information. And by pulling from there, you are essentially calling on a certain dia or deity entity. So you got to be clear on your source as well. That means you got to pull from a good information source before you eventually venture into that progressing that idea. And it's often the case that most ideas are trash. Why? You're pulling from a whole lot of dias, which means you have a lot of walking dias around you. And this creates the conundrum of you having to puzzle yourself with a lot of trashy ideas. So you have to filter the noise. You have to essentially have a good signal to noise ratio, so that you could be able to tune out the noise and really obtain that pure signal. And it's quite difficult while you're here on Earth. So that's something I've been pondering about, because it's like it doesn't make sense to just receive ideas. Eventually, in all, you receive ideas because you are an information extractor. I mean, as you move around, as you progress, as you create more movement, you generate more information, and you get exposed to different environments. As you switch environments, you switch contexts, and there's a whole lot of complexities to having to essentially generate ideas. But that's not enough. And when you come to the engineering aspect of things, engineering is all about integrating, building, and continually maintaining a certain design plan that you come up with. And you have to have really good ideas, of course, to come up with a design plan. But the reality of the world is often what dictates your engineered approach. And that's also one area that you need to pay attention to, because your constraints and your ceilings are what actually force you to adapt and grow and really come up with a solution that fits a given need or solves a given problem. So if you have this combination of engineering discipline and also an idea generation that doesn't die out, but still has the realistic noise filtering ability or capability that reinforces the whole process, then you have a well-made ecosystem, at least to some degree, that helps you continually build and progress further. So this I know I kind of stretched the conversation or the video a little bit too much now, but what I'm trying to say is that you actually can build useful things. And the only thing that is kind of holding you back is basically you trying to find a way to scale your consciousness. In essence, by that I mean you need to have a way to escape the dome or constraints that have been laid out by either external or internal factors that you've put in consideration. So all I have to say is that talk a lot is very useful because it all comes down to having to generate as much ideas. And the more ideas you generate, the more feedback you can use to essentially sculpt out your ideas to a useful state, or essentially a useful stage where it can actually be pushed to production to produce a very useful product that can eventually convert and help people progress in their daily lives, which is also including you. And if you can't use your product, if you can't eat from your product, at least to my belief or to my understanding, it is not a good product that you believe in that is good enough. And it's often the case that you feed from your product as much as you feed others with your product. And that's kind of my principle and belief, and has always been my belief in that if when you move across time, essentially when time passes along, it's often the case that you need a good way to engineer and build out something useful for yourself. And it's often the case that that something is essentially a part of encountering process, or essentially a side questing process to a degree that allows you to, well, one, be part of the idea generation pipeline. And also, it helps you to validate that idea in the sense that there are a good amount of people that would be willing to listen to that because they share the same problem, or essentially they're part of the same problem group. So these are kind of thoughts that you need to keep in account whenever you're venturing and actually building out your ideas. And I hope this was kind of useful, and I hope you're doing well. But for the most part, I'm just doing this series of videos where I record my thoughts and essentially ideas because it really helps me filter down on the noise and cut down on the noise and actually make something useful that people would eventually be willing to listen to, and eventually build out into a useful product piece that we can all enjoy and really improve our lives with. So I conclude my video with that, and well, have a good Sunday. Bye.